Nice.
Welcome to the Grappling With podcast. Dr. Chris Hardy and William Walker will take a deep dive into topics covering wellness and prevention, performance, recovery, and injury management. Our mission is to provide the latest science-based information to help you get the most out of your grappling journey, both on and off the mat, and help you overcome any challenges you may be grappling with. Dr. Hardy is a licensed physician and BJJ practitioner, but the contents of the podcast are meant for educational purposes only and should not be taken as medical advice. Please seek out personalized care from your own medical provider prior to implementing any medical treatment or intervention.
Welcome, Bill. How are you doing? Oh, yeah. You know we'll have to pay royalties for that, right?
A little bit, but it'll be worth it because that's the theme song today.
It is. It's National Ice Cream Day.
Yes, that's why.
I know, and Bill was super cool and brought me a Snickers ice cream.
Put it out there. Let people know.
It's pretty amazing.
Take a bite. Let me watch.
I think you've already eaten yours, so haven't you?
Don't take a bite like that. Take a real bite. Unwrap that thing.
Stop being a pussy and put it in your mouth.
Yeah. Look at me when you do it.
Eye contact?
Yeah. Yes. Pause the podcast. Holy cannoli, that was good. Now I see why she married you.
Well, I do have some talents.
Yeah. You're popular in Bangkok.
I knew you were going to go there. I'm trying not to smack on the microphone.
Yeah, you're a monster. You could just push the mic away instead of trying to lean off the...
So,
oh my, just eat it like a human. You're a monster. So, yeah, it's National Ice Cream Day. I brought ice cream Snickers for everybody. These psychos, when I say that, these psychos, I mean Chris and Olivia, didn't eat it right away.
you and Carrie took...
We handled business. Let's just put it out there. We handled our business. And we didn't break off pieces like a weirdo.
Is that like a Peloton rider? Did I just do that? Like I ride Peloton?
I'm not trying to get kicked in the face next time I spar, so I'm not going to throw any shade at Peloton riders. Because they get a little footsie.
Well, thank you for it's my favorite candy bar and made into an ice cream. Can't get better than that.
Apology rejected.
Amazing. How have you been doing?
I'm okay. I'm upset about a odd accident I had on the mats.
I think we can all see that. Olivia, So
zoom it in.
Those of you that aren't as old as me, you may not remember the former Russian president.
Oh.
You know what I'm talking about? Gorbachev?
Yeah. Coffee stain guy.
Yeah, you kind of...
I got a little something
You're
there.
going for it.
I am.
Yeah, get a little scar there. It'd be cool.
Yeah. I don't think my hairline will ever look the same. But, you know.
Would you like to provide a cautionary tale? Would you like to talk about how it happened?
Oh, well, I would say the recommendation is if you're getting close to the edge of the mat, anywhere you're training, you should probably pause and then reset. Now, I'm also a fan of ADCC, and I think if it's a tournament, you let those monsters go off the mat and keep going. That's just me. I think that's a good rule that ADCC does, but when you're training...
Yeah. Well, we should have talked to Kyle, one of our black belts who used to teach the class you're teaching now, and apparently there was windows broken.
Yeah, that was...
During the day class.
That was when our gym, the mats butted up against a wall that had a bunch of windows. Mm-hmm. And a big fella named Sean, Rashawn, decided to throw someone through the window. And yeah, that was entertaining. I think I was there, if I remember.
I'm sure you were.
Yeah.
Was this one of your head posting type of things? Or
yeah, I was doing a belly down armbar on this beautiful white belt, double A-ron, and he was being very stingy, as he should. Mm-hmm. Oddly, right before the class, we had talked about, you need to try to take my scalp. You need to, attack me.
You told him this.
I think it was just kind of like a general consensus that everyone's going to like really try getting me, especially because, you know, Hunter, when he comes in, it's like his life goal to tap me. And now Josh has put a bounty on me.
Haggerty?
No, Healed.
Oh,
Purple belt.
yeah.
He is his goal in life at this point is to submit me. And that's kind of rubbed off onto everybody. So with that, Aaron wanted to take my scalp and try peeling my wig back.
Well, he
He did pretty good.
took a flap off of you.
Yeah, he did. So
Okay.
I was posting on my forehead, and I got caught on a little something off the mat. And
The funniest thing is I was at work, and I get this picture
from Olivia.
from Olivia with you blood all streaming down your face. I'm like, oh, do you think this needs stitches? I'm like, I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, pretty much everyone in my family was pushing to get stitches, but I, like a gentleman, said no.
Yeah,
I don't think I.
you didn't need it because it's a flap. It will heal down.
So is that typical if someone gets a? I mean, because it looked, especially in the moment, it looked pretty bad. But if it's more of a flap,
Yeah, because when you do sutures, you want to approximate the skin. So if you have like a cut with
that mean?
So in other words, if I do a cut right down your arm with a knife, the tension of the skin will peel open.
Sure.
Approximation just means
Like a hot dog in the microwave.
Exactly. When it kind of cracks and splits.
Yeah.
So the approximation just means to try to bring those edges of the skin together and hold them there to then allow the healing to take place, so then they'll form their scar.
Okay.
And if you don't have sutures in place, what happens is you'll end up, it will almost like fill in between there. It's called healing by second intention. But it forms this nasty, big, keloid looking scar because of that. And so if you approximate them and bring the edges together, your scar is a lot narrower.
Okay.
So when you have a flap, typically it lays down. You can pretty much, as long as you put some pressure on it, for the most part, and there's not a lot of tension around it, it's not trying to pull itself apart. So it will kind of just kind of adhere itself and then start to heal, as long as you don't, pick at it.
Because this wasn't like bunched up or anything, it was still a pretty smooth. Shout out to Jeff. He hadn't done any trauma care since he was in like the Navy doing training, but he was right on it, and he threw some gloves on and put a lot of pressure on it, and then
That's good, man. Took care of you.
Yeah.
That's the big thing. And then like you did a good job of keeping it clean, especially when you got it on the mats. You're always worried about infection.
You should tell them about the how we looked really Everett.
Oh yeah. So
This is funny.
So I decided, I was like, okay, I'm definitely not going to go to the urgent care or anything like that and ignore what my wife wants and what my mom wants, what my mother-in-law wants. I'm over that.
But so you got my text and said you'll be fine.
Yeah.
And so then
I was done.
you just
It was a wrap.
that was the answer you were looking for.
And I was like, I'm probably going to see him tomorrow, and Carrie, and you guys can kind of tell me I'm an idiot or whatever. So I, which I didn't, and I just stayed home and ate donuts.
I know you did.
I knew I needed to let's do another cleaning, and then the bandage job, let's clean that up a little bit, because I had to go to work. I had some stuff to shoot. So we go to Walgreens on Broadway, which is a little rough. It's about as downtown Seattle as you can imagine in Everett, right? So we go in there, we get some bandages, we get some gauze, and we get some what is that stuff?
Antiseptic?
Antiseptic kind of spray. Not a spray, but it'll squirt out. So I don't really know. It's kind of messy, right? And Olivia, she's struggling with the thing. So I'm like, just give me that damn thing. I get out, I go on the sidewalk, and then I peel off my bandages. I look like a mental patient, right? Because it's around my head. Olivia pointed out I look like at the ending of The Burbs when Tom Hanks is throwing himself in the ambulance.
Nice.
I look just like him.
Yeah.
So I'm looking in the reflection of our car that's parked on the street.
Yeah.
And I'm peeling my wig back, and I start spraying this stuff, just dousing it, just some people walking into Walgreens, like double taking me, and I'm giving them weird looks, just spraying, and I'm dabbing my bloody head. And then I'm like, okay, that's good. And then I just get back in the car and we're gone.
So basically, you look like one of the things on what was that Brad Pitt zombie movie, Z?
Yeah,
Remember?
World War Z.
World War Z.
I was a little bit more, I would say I was more of a fresh carcass from The Walking Dead.
Oh, okay.
I was a little bit more of that because I had a little bit of wits to me.
Just getting just finally feeling the brain, feeling like you want to eat a little brain. Okay, not quite full there yet. Okay.
And I was not quite sure what was going on, so I was looking in the mirror like, so
Okay.
very Everett. I mean, when we go on like a taco time run real late at night or something like that, we know where we call them hordes. Because in Everett, like downtown area, there's little pockets where there'll be like 15 peeps just chilling on a corner, and it's like dark, and you don't even know what they're doing, but they're all just kind of chilling there. And you're like, this is a bad place to be. So,
but you probably figured out if you walk around with blood streaming down your face, looking all crazy, people usually leave you alone anyway.
a little bit,
Yeah,
a little bit for the most part.
kind of a good tactic.
Yeah, I usually do that. So that was my day.
Well, excellent. And also this week we had Who's Number One?
Yes, we watched a live molestation.
That's what it was.
Was that an aggressive way to say that?
No,
Okay, because that's what it was.
it was like, I'm going to do this when I want to do this. And when that just doesn't work out the way I want, then I'm just going to kind of submit you in another way that,
Right, because the crowd said,
because I just kind of,
"What are you waiting for?" And he's like, "Okay, fine, I'll do
all
it."
right, yeah.
was
Singing and, kind of
Right.
to the music going on.
Yeah. Yeah, we're talking about Gordon Ryan versus Pedro Marinho. And Gordon he attempted to submit probably top 3 guy in the world
Yeah, I would agree.
to just smothering.
Yeah. That looked horrible.
That's what you do to first day guys that are spazzy. Maybe a blue belt that's visiting, and you're like, dude, you got to chill out. So you give them that. Olivia hates it, but I call it the mother's milk.
Did you create this term?
No, I heard it somewhere.
Where? Andrew?
No. Don't give that man that credit. I think I was watching.
I was like, can you milk me, fucker?
There's a jiu-jitsu like tournament called like the PGF that a 10th Planet Brandon McCaffrey puts on.
Nice.
And there was some dude that was submitting people with that mother's milk, and I was like, dude, that's beautiful.
Oh.
So I stole it from whoever that guy was.
And I feel like depending on your personal hygiene, it could be even worse.
For sure. Now,
how about no rash guard?
I mean, I'm done. If Maynard tries doing this to me, it's a wrap. I'm done.
But just looking at that control from Mount, man, and just, both arms overhead and just...
Or even just one, because that's what he was intentionally trying to do.
And
just a single.
I'm glad he was rubbing his head, too, because I'd want a little encouragement, too. I'd be like,
he's
like, it's okay.
Did you hear he whispered in his ear?
I'm sure he did.
He said he did it a couple times.
Submitted him?
Yeah, but when he decided to, because someone in the crowd ridiculed him, he took his back, started to sink in the choke, which pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And he goes, all right, Pedro, you won. I didn't smother you and get you to tap by smothering. And then he choked him.
He immediately tapped.
That's so
Immediately tapped
so
him.
gangster, man.
Like, but he's saying he won because he
I just
handed over an envelope that said,
should I smother this person too? Felipe Pena, yeah.
So,
which I'm going to look forward to that one too.
There was also a horrific.
Oh my gosh! Big Dan snapped his ankle.
Like the loudest. Do you think that was the Achilles or the?
No, that was a lateral ankle snap. That thing broke out. I would say he either dislocated it and or broke probably the fibula, if I had to guess.
Yeesh. So similar to Craig Jones, Vinny Magalhaes. I mean, that was more of a spiral, and it didn't pop.
Yeah, that's a little different. This, if you go back and look at it, Carrie and I was like, hey, let's see that again. You see it just fail structurally. It's like, boom.
Okay.
Yeah. to the lateral side, and man, I was like, that just gives me the willies, man.
The sound was brutal.
What I was thinking about doing is getting the link to that and sending Jonathan Kang that just to make him watch it over and over since he's a podiatrist.
He almost cried just when I grabbed his ankle.
Yeah.
He was like, "No, this isn't allowed.
Yeah.
We don't do this anymore."
That's hilarious.
So yeah, it was good. It was a good event. And there's
I thought it
another
was
big one that's coming.
I
up.
got to say though, carrying out, we watched the replay on it. We didn't watch it live, and just as a request to FloGrappling, can you guys edit that a little better, please?
Oh yeah.
Did you see what was happening? Like we were in the middle of watching one match, and all of a sudden it would throw in like 10 seconds of like a previous match, or it would go to a commercial right in the middle of the thing, and then we would miss it. And
Yeah, the commercial stuff is probably the biggest complaint from everybody because not just that there is commercials, but they shrink the match down real tiny. So it's hard to see, and then they do it at the most inopportune times.
And they have some Verizon guy that I could give a fuck less about, you know. Sorry for the F-bomb, but that's how I was feeling.
But yeah, they do have a lot of issues with, like they obviously have someone like Olivia that's controlling the cameras. But then if I were to guess from a production person's perspective.
Yeah, that's your thing.
They don't have someone that is actually managing and directing and executive producing. Now, I think like Hollywood Mike, he does, and then Howell does.
I saw Howell actually yell at someone, "Hey, can you switch the
right
switch the thing?"
And the thing is, I think they're relying on the person that's controlling the cameras.
Oh,
so they have they have someone that's doing what Olivia's doing, and then they have someone on each camera, like manually. And there needs to be, and then they have the commentators that are saying, "Hey, can you switch that camera?" But most likely, all of these people off air are talking. So they're communicating to each other already. So when Hal tries to direct someone to do something, it gets lost in the shuffle, right?
See.
So that's why if you have an executive producer that's above all of that person can have this grand view, kind of like Olivia does in the screen over there, where it has every camera view.
then go to the
And they can
best
say,
one.
go camera 3.
Yep.
Go camera 2. They can also listen to Hal say, "Hey, switch cameras," and then he knows exactly which camera to go to.
And the rest of the camera could just keep doing their thing.
Exactly, and that executive producer can tell, let's say, camera 1, "Hey, go to your left a little bit."
Well, for sure. And it wasn't even, and I agree with you on that, but it wasn't even that. It's like when they did the playback, like the recorded playback, there was like stuff spliced in where it shouldn't be. And
And once again, that comes down to having an executive producer that can dictate, like, "Hey, I want minute 6 minutes 30 seconds of this match to 6 minutes 45 seconds, and then I also want this clip," so they can kind of help the person that's cutting that together, rather than that person trying to guess. Because a lot of the time they have the intro walk, right, when they're walking in, which is completely worthless, and then they have certain parts of the match which often has some impact. Sometimes they get it, and then sometimes it's like a worthless point.
I see what you're saying, like a montage of the match. I wasn't even saying that.
Yeah.
I'm saying we're watching a match, like
It's in the match.
we're watching a match. We're watching it live. Not live. We're watching a match go on, and then a clip from like 5 matches ago.
Okay.
We'll be stuck in the middle of it
Interesting.
for 10 seconds. And we're like, what is the heck is going on? That was my biggest
That's
thing.
very goofy.
That was my point. If you go back and watch that, given what you do for a living, your head would blow up.
Yeah, and that's my big bugaboo with
You hate their white balance too.
like out of nowhere. I don't know if you guys noticed this, but one of the cameras, it was very magenta, like, and it was like overexposed. For all the other matches, it was fine. Then out of nowhere, one camera, I'm sure it ran out of battery and they had to swap it or something, that the settings got switched. But
Interesting.
like someone needs to be looking at that and be like, "That looks like shit."
Well, I know it sounds like we're just criticizing them, but when you have such a great event
yeah,
and such great, I mean, they have good commentators, they have great participants, and the refs. I mean, everything is a solid thing. It's just like that kind of that production value.
they're only missing very small pieces.
and
Like,
man, it would be so good.
yeah, there's just a couple small things to take it to the, like, for example, not all of them, but a lot of their their interviews and stuff like that, they're just not lit quite correctly. They're very close. And the thing is, I follow some of the people that work there, and they have the skills. I just wonder if maybe there's too much on individuals' plates, so certain things kind of get pushed to the side.
It makes sense.
You know, it's not like I know like Reed Connell, that guy's good. They have this new guy, Borrow Jiu-Jitsu. This guy's got a great photography. So I don't know. But,
Okay.
And I'm just kind of armchair quarterbacking a little bit, right?
That's the most fun to do anyway.
Yeah. I just sound like a big fat hater, but I appreciate what they're doing. It's
I do too. I really do too. I mean, because it's a great event anyway. So that was cool. I like the card was great.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was really fun. I think, you know, once again, not hating, but just addressing, you know, they had the no time limit match that went over 2 hours.
Yeah.
And I guess it was because my big critique was, why is that not the last match? Like, why would you make Gordon and Pedro after them?
So
when you know the potential of a 4-hour match is there, when I guess it was scheduled that way.
Yeah.
And at the last second, they asked Gordon if he'd want to switch it.
Yeah. I also think that, you know, just again, my own opinion of one, you know, I think that once you get to the big show, they should run it just like any other who's number one match at that point. Instead of going, I get it going through the actual show where it's no time limit, but we both know that, you know, and you and I love grappling just as much as anyone, that, you know, those can get super tedious.
Well, yeah,
to watch.
especially, so Kyle came out and said, Kyle Chambers, he came out and said that Isaac was doing anti-jiu-jitsu, which I was like, bro, I understand he's a little emotional. He just lost 25 G's.
Yeah.
He just lost the show, all these things.
Yeah.
So he's just frustrated. But if someone was doing anti-jiu-jitsu, it would have been him, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was just looking at that. I mean, maybe they could have gone have a 30-minute match.
Maybe. I don't mind no time limit. Like, I know this is like, some people really dislike it. I actually don't mind it, but it's all up to the grapplers.
Yeah.
If it's going to be like, Gordon's had plenty of no time limit matches, and they're always entertaining. Him and Keenan's was pretty entertaining. It went 90 minutes. It's all up to the grapplers.
Yeah.
Like that Isaac Michelle, that guy was attacking the whole time.
He sure was.
If Kyle, when he did attack, it was freaking awesome. He had him in some trouble a couple times. Like, maybe the biggest trouble that ended up not being a finish was from him, right? That triangle armbar.
Yeah, triangle armbar, yeah.
But when you're just willing to go home alone and just try to get me, bro. And if I could just say this, okay, I'm not discriminating. But if you're going to wear spats with no shorts on.
I knew it. Here it is.
Kind of deserve to lose.
As soon as he came on, Carrie and I go, Bill is going to hate that.
Yeah, we talked about it during.
Did you? Yeah.
Can I just throw another layer?
Of course you may.
Because there's offenses. First degree. Second degree.
Offenses.
Murder. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Third degree.
Okay. Manslaughter.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're getting close to that first degree. What's the worst kind of murder?
First degree. Premeditated.
Premeditated.
That first degree by definition is premeditated.
You're getting down that kind of a road when you're wearing spats, no shorts on, and the spats are light colored. You bastard.
Well,
Looking for a date?
He was looking for a couple dates.
why? It was just hilarious, though. He walked on, and Carrie and I looked at each other immediately. I'm like, oh, my God, Bill is going to go off.
Bill might not watch it.
He may not. Or he might. Or he might.
Hey, depends on what kind of mood I'm in.
Yeah. So
A little
anyway.
bit of that kielbasa. So
I guess. If you're fluid like that, that's, I guess.
What did you think about the entry of the rat guy? The rat or
well,
whatever.
first of all, let me just say that when I was rolling with our professor last week,
okay.
he sewer ratted me. He was going scratch, scratch.
Oh my gosh.
And I thought,
What a dork.
no, he's already, and it's when he was absolutely smashing me. Mm-hmm. Right?
Rude.
It was hilarious.
I can't believe him.
I just thought, I'm just showing how far the reach of the sewer rat.
Right.
Yeah.
It's infiltrated a 3rd degree black belt.
Yeah. Almost a 4th degree, I think he's coming up on, isn't he?
Almost only counts in hand grenades.
Okay. I don't know. I'm going to count that in black belts, honestly.
Liv, can you turn down my headphones?
Yeah.
I feel like Chris is yelling at me
I might be.
a little bit. Holy smokes. He just turned it up.
Oh.
Sorry. Is that better?
I'll just start breathing heavy.
It's off now.
Okay.
Is that better?
Try saying something.
I will say something.
Oh, well, got nothing.
Uh-oh. Well, we came.
that
There we
better?
go. Yeah, that's
All
good.
right. So we almost crashed there.
That's called a segue.
Okay. Well, that's a great segue. Some technical difficulties back into our topic we might want to talk about today.
Want me to bring the song back up? Cold as ice?
No,
Okay.
I don't want to get another copyright strike.
Yeah, that's true.
I already had one, I'm sure. So the question was, I've heard from other people too. They want to know the deal with cold exposure, deliberate cold exposure, so to speak. Like you're doing it on purpose, not like you got stuck or fell off of a boat.
Or the water swimming thing that we.
Yeah, you're actually on your own volition going in there and try to get in some cold water. What are the benefits type like that? And I got to tell you,
And why has it gotten so popular?
well, I think we're all looking for edges in recovery. We're all looking to optimize health now, which is great. And I think I'm glad that people are looking at that, different ways they can, optimize performance, or, the preventive medicine piece and all that. I was reluctant to actually do this topic because it's been done very, very well in the last couple months, both by Andrew Huberman and Rhonda Patrick. They did a phenomenal job, very sciencey.
She's been on this for.
She's really that in the sauna, especially for I mean, she does. They both
Vitamin
did.
D, right, is another thing she really pushes.
Yeah. Oh, she does.
talks about.
She does a lot of good stuff with nutrition in general, and Andrew Huberman does a great job of breaking the neuroscience kind of stuff. It's super cool. But I thought that
We don't have the reach of us.
last I saw, I think he has over 1 million subscribers.
Those numbers aren't real.
Oh, sure.
Those aren't real.
So, but I thought that we could just, give a little background, but then, maybe give some things specific to our community. I think then I thought, okay, maybe it's worth doing. But if you really want an in-depth look at it, especially back in August on the Huberman Lab podcast, he did a great, great job on this stuff.
Was that a solo or did he have
He's solo.
Okay.
Yeah, he did it. He did.
Has he ever written a book?
Not that I know of, but I mean, I don't,
Checkmate.
he has a full-time. Oh, because I have a book. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm not going to compare myself. So I think it's helpful if we're going to talk about cold in general. So those of you that have not gone back and listened to our 4th episode, it might be a good thing to do to put this all in kind of context. Anytime we talk about some environmental stimulus like cold or heat, the 4th episode was the stress cup one where we talk about stressors and how it affects the body. This is another one. And, it's kind of, I'll put I know you love how I put my glasses on here.
It's
kind of hang them over
It's
here.
not how you put them on. It's how you let them hang off your face.
Yeah, no, I'm a freaking monster. So, cold or heat, but we're talking about cold in this, is another stressor that has beneficial effects through. We talked about hormesis. If you remember, what do you remember from that episode about hormesis? I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit. Here's a test.
Sounds like the mix of a prostitute and a burger.
What?
Can I get a hormesis, please? Extra rare on wheat.
With a little bit of gonorrhea.
Okay, God.
What are you saying? You just said a mix of what did you
you're
say? A prostitute?
Too far.
Okay. I
I
just
don't
trying
remember
to.
much. Let's just put that.
Okay. So.
I don't remember much in pertaining to that word.
Okay. Something, and we use the example of sunlight, where
Actually, before you go off, Can we test Olivia? Because she's getting
Yeah.
there.
Oh, how dare you?
What do you remember about hormesis?
The benefits in the dose? Wait, hold on.
Yeah. Ooh.
Oh.
We're getting there.
Do you dip naan in it?
What?
Non-bread.
Yeah.
No, that's hummus.
Oh,
So Olivia was closest. She wins.
okay.
So we use the example of sunlight, where a certain dose of sunlight and the UV light will produce a beneficial effect. Even though it's potentially harmful, the right dose of it will produce actually a response to the body that's beneficial. In that case, increased DNA repair mechanisms, vitamin D, all things that are beneficial from something that's potentially harmful. So, and we also mentioned a lot of the chemicals that are in plants that we eat that are supposed, that quote unquote good for you. Many of them are actually anti-predation and defense molecules that actually have the same type of effect, where a little bit of a toxin, so to speak, will upregulate our own defense mechanisms and then have a health benefit, right? So the same idea of cold, where cold can absolutely kill you. You can get hypothermia and die, but the right dose can actually be beneficial through the process of hormesis, I guess is the point. And if you think about this, why is this a big deal now? Because you asked that question earlier. Why are we hearing so much about this stuff? I think people are finally realizing, we have a ton of stresses in modern society, but they're not the type of environmental stresses we used to have to deal with in general. So for instance, being super cold, we live in pretty much climate controlled homes. We have cars that are climate controlled. We like that certain temperature, around 70 something degrees, not too hot, not too cold. But I think what we're missing is what the human race kind of came up with for most of its existence, was kind of extremes and having to deal with those and having the body having to adapt to those type of things. Very much like how we've fallen away from physical exercise as a society. And we're seeing the bad health effects from that. So I think people are finally realizing that, we need some kind of stress and struggle, perhaps, from our environment to really kind of optimize us as humans through hormesis type mechanisms, right? Whether it's exercise, whether it's heat exposure, whether it's cold exposure. So I think people are finally looking at that, and there's something primal about that. It makes you feel, like the most human when you kind of get through a stress like that, and I think we need those type of struggles, both physically and mentally. So using it deliberately in that manner, it does do some things for us. And I want to go through kind of some of the effects it does first, and then we can talk about, some of where the rubber meets the road, like how long, how cold, when, where, and that type of thing. Some of the general effects of cold exposure, and most scientists talk about cold exposure, anything under 15 degrees centigrade, which is 59 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay. So 59 degrees Fahrenheit and lower, typically it's considered, a cold exposure as far as water goes. Because we could go out in 32 degree air temperature with just shorts on and no shirt and be able to last a whole lot longer than we would be able to go into just above freezing water.
Why is that?
The thermal conductivity of water. So you may have noticed, like if you put heat on, you can put like dry heat, but if you get in a hot tub, you get hotter quicker, right? If you go in a sauna and make it humid, right? Water conducts heat much, much better both ways. So that's why, people, a 212 degree air temperature, super hot, but people could get in a sauna from that. But if you get in 212 degree water, that's boiling. You get severe thermal burns, right? So it's because of how fast it conducts both in and out heat. Okay. And so cold really pulls heat away from the body very quickly if you're in a liquid doing it. And that's why it's a thermodynamic property. Okay. So anyway, when I'm talking about cold exposure, I'm talking about usually through water. So whether it's cold shower or even better, cold immersion, we're actually getting up to your neck in water. So one of the things it does, and we don't know a whole lot about the downstream effects of this, but we're starting to look into these things called cold shock proteins. Have you ever heard of those things? When you get in super cold water, you immediately get what's called cold shock. You have a physiologic response through your, the receptors in your skin are like, oh my God, this is freaking cold. It goes to your brain and starts off this cascade of events. One of the things it does, this cold shock proteins are secreted. What they generally do is they protect the body from damage, like DNA damage or for any stressors. So it's not just cold, believe it or not, that stimulates these things. It can be other things as well that are stressors. It also helps prevent protein damage. And a lot of people are looking at cold shock proteins with like neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and things like that, where what we find is proteins have become unfolded. And it helps them kind of retain their folding and keep them active longer. It's one of the things as part of the stress response to cold is these cold shock proteins. And there's just not a whole lot of research onto, we know a couple of these in humans and we're kind of tracing how it works, but there's not really a whole lot of conclusions yet on the long-term effects of those. I just wanted to bring it up because that's one of the things that does happen. Sure. The main things that happen right away is we get this big adrenaline response, both what's called epinephrine, which is we know as adrenaline, norepinephrine. You probably heard of that too. It's a relative of that.
Thought they were the same.
Nope, they're different.
Good call.
And norepinephrine really is it helps increase your mood, your focus. As a matter of fact, like for ADHD, many of the medicines that we give are stimulants, and it helps increase norepinephrine. Right, that's what caffeine does too. It helps. So people they're starting to look at these things, even for people that have ADHD, our focus issues, mood issues like depression, anxiety. A lot of those people do have decreased levels of norepinephrine, and so this can help that substantially. There's been case reports of people that have gotten off their depression medications just by doing regular cold exposure because of this norepinephrine and the next chemical I'm going to talk about here in a second. But it's super interesting how that works. Yeah. So these are the things that happen immediately in the brain. The other thing it secretes is dopamine, which is kind of like a feel-good hormone. It really is to help with motivation. Dopamine is a reward chemical. Like, when you see a Snickers ice cream,
heck yeah.
What do you think when you're motivated to go?
I want to touch it
and get it. And then after you eat it, you get that kind of, oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's dopamine.
That comes before feeling like a fat piece of shit.
Well, right. But the initial dopamine hit is what keeps people going.
Real good.
And by the way, with obesity, that whole system is dysregulated. So people are needing more and more to get that same hit of dopamine, right? So, kind of tying it into other things too. But there's a big increase in dopamine as well too for this deliberate cold exposure. What's interesting is you get the dopamine increase if you know you're going to do this on purpose. You don't get the dopamine if you fall overboard in the...
Right.
Yeah. So there's something about the intention that determines whether you get that dopamine or not.
So I know it's been talked about that exercise can help people with fighting depression.
Big time.
And if you're trying to overcome some stuff like that, that, a lot of people say, are you working out? How's your sleep? Like a lot of that kind of stuff. If they were trying to self-diagnose or fix without getting, external help, therapy, so on and so forth. Yeah. Would you say that, you're not, obviously it's not medical advice, but would it be a good idea to dabble with doing your own cold therapy in the shower?
Absolutely. And this is something that is not as dangerous to do as opposed to other things like, there are things that Carrie helps her patients with if they don't want to be on SSRIs. So she will prescribe some SSRIs to someone, but also people that don't, she like 5-HTP and other things like that, where if you start dabbling with that kind of stuff on your own, it may not be good for you.
Right.
Where this, really, the risk is super low, and there is a potential reward to it. So, it's much safer as long as you don't have like a pre-existing heart condition, like an arrhythmia or something, where that rapid cold could kind of, set off an arrhythmia in some people that are predisposed. But it's pretty darn safe, especially if you start out slowly, which we'll talk about here in a second.
Most people, I assume, would, because it's not easy.
There's always those people that are like, hey, bro, I'm just going to go right into the, and those are they usually don't last, right?
True.
Yeah.
What?
What'd you say?
No.
Oh, I thought you just said something under your breath.
No, I think there's a fly in
Was
here
there?
buzzing around.
Okay. So, norepinephrine, dopamine, that initial, and it's fairly significant, up to 3 to 5 times the resting amount if you get a norepinephrine and dopamine after these cold exposures. Now, for our community, one of the biggest things it does, it's super interesting, is that if you think about what we're doing when we're getting in the cold, you get that big rush of adrenaline and the whole 9 yards. The flight or fight system goes real high. But afterwards, you get this big rebound of that parasympathetic, that vagus nerve that we talked about before, that thing that helps rest and the relaxation, the opposite of the flight or fight. That seems to happen fairly quickly. And that is a key point in recovery from, let's say we just did a real hard, like I can tell you Monday and Thursday, I had pretty hard training, had some hard rolls. And the next morning I still feel a little kind of jacked up a little bit. And if you remember from our episode on stress, there are some ways we could tell if our nervous system was kind of ready. One of them was heart rate variability. And I was like, well, it's kind of hard to measure accurately. But that grip strength, that whole 9 yards, right? Yeah. That has to do with the level of the sympathetic nervous system that is still lingering from your training. If we can get the parasympathetic to come on faster and prepare you better for your next session. In other words, you'll recover faster and you still won't be hanging on to the after effects of that last workout.
Gotcha.
So that is one of the biggest promises, I think, that I think has helped me too, especially, for instance, if I, let's say I had, like even yesterday, I had a couple hard rounds yesterday too, and I was feeling kind of beat up. And this morning I did a cold exposure, and I know it's just anecdotal, but I feel a lot better. Yeah. So for our community, it's something we could really look into as far as, let's say someone is like having problems, like, man, I'm just with everything going on, I just feel like I can only train 2 days a week. Yeah. And maybe if they started slowly adding some of the stuff in, it may help them be ready for another training session a little quicker.
What about the person that they don't do jiu-jitsu? They, so they're not getting these super intense training sessions in. Maybe they work out. Maybe they don't. Maybe it's just a mom and she listens to this podcast for health benefits and information, or spouses or something like that. What about them? Are they going to be able to get a noticeable benefit?
Yep, because specifically, they've actually studied this a lot in endurance athletes. People like just to do, let's say they want to do, I'm sorry, I was messing with Peloton, but there's nothing wrong with Peloton. If that's what you're doing, like some long sustained cardio, it actually can help recover. And there's some evidence that shows it actually helps with that delayed onset muscle soreness a little bit too. So
is that a lactic acid buildup?
No. Steve, why are you? No, it's not.
Okay.
I know you're trying to push my button, aren't you?
Maybe.
Don't do that, because what's going to happen is I'm going to do a whole episode on lactic acid, and you're going to want to stick a sharp stick in your eye because it's going to be so horrific.
I'm ready for it.
Yeah, but we probably would get like people just unsubscribe probably at that point.
Well, you're stuttering now, so I can tell you're upset.
I am upset. You got me, and it doesn't help with my speech impediment anyway. Make me self-conscious too.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So
you sound good.
Thank you. I still have the aftertaste of that amazing Snickers. I'm still drooling a little
Dude, I can
bit from that.
smell it on your breath, and it makes me want to kiss you.
Oh, well, you know.
I feel like Bill's
You could
already
do- you could-
dropping, like your blood sugars
A little bit.
dropping.
A little bit.
You feel like it?
I'm diving.
Are you? Where's
I got some water.
Usually you have a bang.
I know. I didn't bring one.
He drank a Red Bull on the way here.
So if you're relying on me to carry this thing, we're in big trouble. Okay.
My eyes might get a little glassy because I'm I'm yawning, which doesn't indicate anything on the podcast. It's just I'm literally dying of diabetes.
Okay. Fair enough.
Good, Bill.
So anyway, but
Don't worry, I got questions, Chris.
great. So actual benefit.
What am I going to be like a corpse over here?
Apparently.
Basically.
Apparently.
Okay.
So, but that's kind of an interesting thing that I'm playing with right now about getting that parasympathetic back quicker to help with recovery and get ready for our next session.
Is that the main thing that's going on when we are feeling taxed? Where we had once again, maybe they're not a jiu-jitsu person and they just it's a police officer.
Yeah.
But their stress cup was real full because they just had we have a sheriff training partner that he's had to do back-to-back 16-hour days.
And he's on graveyard. So, yeah, I know.
Horrific. So someone like that to help that reset.
Yeah, and you got to be careful with that, though, too, because this is still a stressor, and it can also add to your stress cup. Mm-hmm. So it's the dose you really have to watch in someone like that.
So
right?
don't go super hard.
No, because it can actually go the wrong way. Because even something good, remember, hormesis depends on the dose at any given time. Mm-hmm. And if we go, going back to that stress cup episode, that allostasis relies on you not overfilling it. To get a positive adaptation to whatever stressor, you can't be overflowing that constantly. So if you're having crappy sleep, ton of stress, and then you go and try, I'm going to do 20 minutes in the cold plunge.
Yeah.
That's too much, right? And so you'll probably have to, and we'll talk about that too. That's a great question because we'll have to dose that a little different.
Because I do have a question about frequency, but I guess we can.
We will, and we'll talk about that too. But that's a great point though because I'm going to talk about some other benefits from people that don't necessarily train jiu-jitsu. Okay.
What do you have though?
Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say. I remember, Chris, you said that when it comes to the cold exposure, because it is a stressor, you don't necessarily do it on days that you train. You'll do it on days you don't train.
Jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like today I did a mobility strength workout, but it wasn't super, super taxing. And so you just kind of have to play with that and know where you are day to day. Like if I had a bad night of sleep, like a real bad night of sleep last night,
you wouldn't have kicked the morning off with a cold plunge,
or very brief or something, right? Yeah, I would have done it. So use day to day. You that's why that's so important. I keep harping on that episode, and I even said during that episode it's something we're going to be coming back to. But that's kind of a really important concept.
It can affect your immune system and make you more likely to get sick or.
Well, for sure. Last time I got the Voldemort, I was immunodepressed from, I think, overtraining because, and it hit me hard because of that, where before it was barely a cold, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's exactly right. And so you got to be careful with it. Now, for those of us that, and this applies to us too, but people that aren't, and let's say you have some medical problems, let's say you have a little insulin resistance, you're pre-diabetic, or you're even type 2 diabetic. This does some really interesting things to fat. So most of the fat we see that we store, what we call subcutaneous, and which is right underneath the skin, kind of the love handles thing, and women tend to get that more in their thighs. That's the subcutaneous fat. And then also the fat around our organs, also known as visceral fat. Those are both classified on something called white adipose tissue or white fat. Okay, and it's just how it looks under a microscope. It looks like these big fat droplets. The cells actually look white. Okay. And there's other types of fat called brown fat. Have you guys heard about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, babies tend to have a lot of brown fat, and little kids do too, because they are you may have noticed this. We watch a young kid, they're unable to shiver. So kids aren't able to shiver until a certain age, I don't know the exact age, but probably, 3 or 4.
Mm-hmm.
You see kids running around in the wintertime, they're like, I'm fine.
Yeah.
They have more brown fat, and we're going to talk about the differences of that. And there's an in-between one called beige fat. So there's like 3 different types of fat we're going to talk about here, and they're very different, where the white fat that is stored under our tissues and next to our organs is pretty much there as excess energy reserves, right?
Okay.
During starvation, or when we're not eating as much calories, the body will start pulling some of that fat off to use as energy. Which, many of us that don't exercise enough and eat to a point where we're just kind of, the body's like, okay, I got to get rid of this somewhere, so I got to store it. Many of us are never tapping into that. Now, the brown fat's a little different. The brown fat in babies and kids, and by the way, now we know that adults still retain a little bit of it, is used primarily for heat generation. So without getting super crazy into biochemistry, if I was going to, for energy production, let's say I didn't eat for a couple of days, my body's going to start pulling fatty acids from that white fat, taking them through the mitochondria, the powerhouses of the cell, and use it to make ATP, which is our energy, right? To power our body and all those things it needs to do. Whereas brown fat, and to some extent beige fat, those fatty acids are not used to generate ATP. They're uncoupled from the system. So they go down a different pathway, and they're used to generate heat. So you can see how that would be really interesting if we could make people that have lots of the white adipose tissue, if we could somehow change that into a type of fat that is usually using to burn heat, you could theoretically start shrinking some of your fat stores because it's not even tied into your energy production. It's just tied into generating heat. And the way to do that is to get yourself adapted and make your body adapt to frequent cold exposure. It makes sense. So 2 types of heat generation in the body. One is due to shivering. We've all shivered, right?
Yeah.
When you get that uncontrolled.
Like an emergency reaction, right?
That's right. It's the muscles contracting it's trying to generate heat that way. Okay. It's called shivering thermogenesis. Thermo just means heat. Genesis means make. Okay. Shivering, making heat. Non-shivering thermogenesis is what we're talking about with this brown fat. It's just creating heat due to the nature of the fat itself. It's not used for energy production. It's used for heat production. So the way to do that, if you get into cold often enough to the proper dose, meaning the intensity and the duration, your body's like, oh man, this knucklehead's getting into some cold environments. I got to do something to adapt via allostasis, right? Stability through change. So I've got to start changing some of this white fat to what's called beige fat. And we know this is happening. Beige fat is in between the brown and the white, but it still has some of the properties of the brown where it can use that fat to make heat. Okay. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah. So it's a mix between white and brown.
Yeah. And the reason why it changes color is because what we're seeing under the microscope is increased mitochondria. Okay. So beige fat has more mitochondria, those power cells, than the white fat, and brown fat has even more. Like, for instance, bears have a ton of brown fat that they use during hibernation in the wintertime.
What about like seals and stuff?
Exactly. Like so they have adaptations to living in those environments. And we can, to an extent, do some of the same things we're finding out by consistent, deliberate cold exposure. And we find that the little bit of brown fat that we retain from childhood is more active with cold exposure. And some of the white fat we have is being changed into quote unquote beige fat that is used more for heat production. So the theory is if you keep doing this, you then have stores of fat that is not just sitting there on your side for just waiting to be used for energy. It's like the body's like, oh gosh, we got to generate more heat, which increases your metabolism over time, right? And so a lot of people are looking at that especially if someone's obese and insulin resistant, because the cold also, the process of this browning of fat also increases your insulin sensitivity, increases your glucose uptake, has a lot of metabolically positive effects too. So Bill, let's say we have a relative that's pre-diabetic, and they're like, okay, I'm exercising more now. I'm really watching my diet. Something you can also help them with is like, hey, if you want to do this deliberate cold exposure, it could help you even more. So it can help some of the fat that you have turn into more of a metabolically active fat to produce heat, and also increase your insulin sensitivity and your ability to take glucose from the bloodstream
What if
better.
my pre-diabetic friend, family member, also has like some joint, maybe like some shoulder issues or something like that? Is there going to be any benefit for that person?
So what we've also seen, and they've had some studies with people with rheumatoid arthritis, which is a really destructive type of autoimmune arthritis. We've actually seen a decrease in inflammation in general due to cold exposure.
Okay.
And it has to do with not the direct effect of the cold; it's the systemic effect of decreasing inflammation in the body. It's pretty neat. It's not like the same thing like putting ice on your arm.
Yeah.
This is a physiologic reduction in inflammation.
So with that example, can we talk, or not yet, maybe, I don't know. Can we talk about getting started?
Yep.
Which we have done before, but let's go back to
Well, and that's where I have an outline to keep us organized here. Otherwise, I'd be all over the place more so than I already am.
Yeah.
But yeah,
we'll get into that then.
we are going to get into that. So the next thing, with all these kind of benefits we're seeing here, anti-inflammation, increased insulin sensitivity, more metabolically active fat, increased parasympathetic nervous system for recovery, increased mood, increased focus, all these type of things due to the effects of this cold. Now it's like your question, okay, first of all, how cold and how long, right? Which is the dose. Like to your point, Olivia, what is the dose of this we're doing?
Yeah.
And a dose is the intensity and the duration. So there's not a good answer for this.
Okay.
It depends on if you're brand new to it, there has an adaptation period where you won't be able to tolerate it like someone that has been adapted to it. And how this works is, like, for instance, some people can't just start out with getting in a really cold body of water.
Yeah.
They'll start out in the shower, right?
Okay.
And let me ask both of you, what is your general gut level reaction to cold exposure? Do you feel really adverse to it, or,
Extremely. I can't even, if the shower's not borderline burning me,
right?
I'm out.
Fiery.
Yeah. Well, how about you, Olivia?
I don't like it. Well, I guess it depends on the situation. Like if I just got done working out, it feels good, like a cooler. But once it starts getting really cold, then I'm like, I just want to get out,
Yeah.
I don't even like the windows. Like if I'm going to, like when we open the windows when it's real hot in there, I actually prefer how like Mo likes it. That Brazilian humid, like super warm. Like I much rather have that than.
But yeah, and and a lot of people are like that.
Just a comfort.
Why?
I don't know.
No, but I mean, if you had to think about that, because you ask, Carrie's had patients that
Because
she's
I'm soft, all right?
No.
Well, I would say for me, I know that I struggle already with like keeping warm, like in my fingers and my toes. So especially like during the winter time, they hurt. It's painful. I had not the greatest circulation, and so that's why I don't like the cold.
She puts her dead feet on my legs.
What's interesting, Olivia, I have the same problem, almost like a Raynaud's phenomenon.
Yeah.
Okay.
A what?
It's a thing where you have too much vasoconstriction in your extremities, and sometimes in air exposure when it's cold, my hands will look purple.
Yeah, I could go to the mountains, have like wool socks, boots, everything, and my feet will feel like I have frostbite. Like
Right.
they're dead.
And I did have frostbite as a kid. What's interesting about cold exposure, part of the hormesis process, it actually will help increase circulation to your extremities afterwards as a rebound effect. So that's something. But my point of asking you those questions is, if you had, like Carrie had suggested to a couple of patients, and it's almost like you want them to walk the plank or do something.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about that? It's like, it's just uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah.
But why do we have such an aversion to it? It's just interesting how that is. And you know, I'm not going to have Carrie on the mic, but I'm going to speak for her.
Of course you will.
I'm going to look over there. When we first got this cold plunge thing, you know, you weren't too enthused about it.
Well, we've tried a few other
Right.
aspects of it, and basically I told you to fuck off.
Yeah, she basically told me where to go with it.
Yeah.
But after you've done this for a period of time, is there a weird almost craving for it?
I definitely know I need to do it,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's what pushes me to go ahead and continue because of the benefits that I know that's going to come down the line.
Yeah, so basically she's saying that she knows it's beneficial for her, so she's keep doing it. I almost have a weird little, almost an addiction sometimes because I feel so good afterwards.
Is that similar to? I was just talking to a couple of the white belts in the midday class.
Yeah.
That are about 4 months in
To training?
to training.
Okay.
And they're in the thick of losing every class for most of sparring.
Oh,
right?
sure.
You know,
Of course.
There's not a lot of wins like a submission or something, which they are. Jeff, I saw that baseball bat joke. But they were both saying when they leave, even though let's say I put them through the ringer, they leave and they're happy.
Right.
They want to come back. Like it was like cool that they got beat up or something.
It's the same thing, right? To an extent. But now they're getting adapted to that.
What is that? What is that?
Getting through struggle. It's a dopamine hit, right? It increases your motivation. You feel like they're doing it deliberately to themselves.
Yeah.
Right. So that was kind of the thing I was saying. You get that big flight or fight response, and then afterwards you get this big dopamine hit, the norepinephrine. You feel euphoric.
Once
you
you
feel
come
good.
back to temperature and stuff like that, you're like
Feeling really good. And it's the same thing. It's just interesting. I found people will tolerate, they're like, oh, I'll get in a sauna at 185 degrees, but there's no way you're getting me in cold. I just find it's interesting
yeah,
that we have such an aversion to it.
yeah.
Well, I think there's something also like shivering
Yeah.
is tiring.
Yeah.
Like your muscles are like, and that's also uncomfortable. Like they feel like tight and tense, and they're, you know.
Oh, I completely agree. But what is it about that? I'm
Versus sweating. Like I could sweat. That doesn't require my muscles to work. Mm-hmm. I'm not fatigued necessarily by sweating.
I've always been fascinated by it. You know, I was a winter surfer growing up. I mean, I surfed in the winter, even with a wetsuit. I probably told you this before.
Is
When
that
we
called
asked,
a snowboarder?
no,
Oh,
we're talking about surfing in the wintertime
oh, okay.
in the ocean.
Oh, got it.
Yeah. No, I'm not a good snowboarder.
Really, that's weird. You surfed, but
Yeah, dude.
Suck
Yeah,
it.
I don't know.
okay.
Yeah, I don't.
Hey, what?
I can play a musical instrument,
But
can't dance.
those hips ain't.
I don't know what it
Those
is.
hips are lying.
Carrie says it looks like a seizure, so and not a good one. So, but anyway, I was saying there's an aversion anyway.
Yeah.
But if you get someone, almost like you kind of have to get them out, start them slowly. So there's all kinds of protocols. If you go to Andrew Huberman's site, he has a whole protocol that he likes.
To get started.
So does Wim Hof. Wim Hof is another one that's obviously world famous because of his cold exposure. And he has some protocols to get started too. You guys can look up. But I find it, get in a warm shower and then start with 10 seconds and turn it down till you feel like you want to get out of the. Okay, and as soon as you feel like you want to get out, then put it back on to warm. Cycle through that a couple times. Cold enough where you're like, okay, nope, I want to get out. It's that feeling of I want to get out is kind of, that's where your temperature is. Okay. Knowing that you're not going to hurt yourself or be in danger of hypothermia, but you get that uncomfortable, I want to get out feeling. So that's the answer to how cold.
Okay.
Okay. It's because it's going to change over time. Because as you adapt, you'll be able to get colder and colder before you get that, hey, I want to get out of here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oddly, our shower does that for us.
That's it.
We have this heat pump switch that is failing. So it'll be hot, and then out of nowhere, it just drops temperature on you.
Oof.
Oh my! And then so you flick it to the like full heat, like
Yeah. Yeah.
and then out of nowhere, it's full heat. We have
Oh.
a tankless, so it's
So do we.
and it like so you're just like shivering out of nowhere, which obviously I hate.
Yeah.
And I'll slap the spout
Yeah.
because it's one of those you can like take it off. And
Yeah, totally.
Get the undercarriage.
Get it away from you.
I'll slap that bitch because it's so cold.
Yeah.
And then I feel it start heating up. I'm like, okay, bring it back. And it's on me. And then it gets. I forget that it's on full hot.
And then it gets,
And it gets me.
well, that's not deliberate
It
cold.
does that about 5 times every shower.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
So that's not deliberate cold exposure then. So you wouldn't get all those dopamine hits. That's against your will.
Right. It's actually negative stress.
It is.
Although what I do, I'm sure being a man, you do this as well, is when I'm waiting for it to heat back up, because I got it like spraying on the wall basically. I box up that shower curtain.
Do you?
Do you really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh my
I think probably every dude boxes up the shower curtain. You?
I have a glass thing.
So you just like shadow box?
No.
A little bit, you throw a couple in there?
No.
You're bullshitting.
Bill walks from the kitchen to the living room and he's shadow boxing.
I bet 80% of dudes, maybe 90, do that.
My brother for sure does not.
Your brother definitely does not.
Have you seen me shadow box?
Never.
Okay.
Not even throw a punch? Like just a nothing.
Nope.
You don't do it like you're waiting for the shower to warm up and you blow up that bad boy, that shower curtain.
No.
Nothing. The towel hanging.
No.
Wow. Please, someone comment and tell me if I'm not alone here. I feel like I'm not alone.
Yeah. I don't know.
Every time, 100% of the time. I'm beating the shit out of that thing.
There's pathology of all forms.
I don't even know what you just said.
Okay, Chris, I do have a question.
Okay.
I have many questions, but this one, because you're talking about the aversion.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have tried doing this. I've tried doing it, and I swear on my life, the 2 times that I've tried pursuing like the cold thing, it's not even, I can suck it up and do the cold. What it is obviously I don't have good breathing technique because my muscles all tense up, and usually within a couple of times of doing it, either the first time or 2 or 3 times, my muscles get super tight in my neck and my traps. I'm like, how do I prevent that? That's what's preventing me from continuing.
You're doing it too cold, too quickly.
Okay.
So the adaptation is really important. Just turn it up to the point where you're like, okay, that's uncomfortable. Okay.
Okay.
Turn it back to hot or warm and cycle through that till you can get longer and longer on those cold periods, and colder and longer duration over time. And you'll have that muscle reaction is the natural sympathetic nervous system. It's everything tensing up. It's a protective response. That will go away if you start to adapt to it.
Okay.
If you do too quickly, I mean, we talked about this with the swimming while people were drowning, right? Because they just jump in, they're not adapted, and all of a sudden they get constricted, and they're not getting blood to their muscles. Everything's tight, right? The same idea. So start slower, definitely. But that's what like Wim Hof talks about, is because not everyone has the ability to get in a body of water either. So a lot of people are doing this primarily in shower.
Sure.
We liked it. I believe in it enough. We invested in that thing called the plunge, where you can actually set a temperature. It has a pump and everything. It's super cool.
There's like these little, what would you call them? Barrels.
Yeah.
They're a couple
Roasting.
$100.
The problem is though, you got to get ice from somewhere,
Yeah.
and that's a pain in the rear.
Right.
I mean, ours goes all the way down to 38 degrees if we wanted through a cooling system, and we're only at 52 right now, and it's
Yeah.
plenty.
Right.
So again, Olivia, so start off slower and until you're able to do it longer. And what's really important though is end on cold though. Okay. So don't do your cold, then get back in the hot for a while and think
So
you
what
did
would
something.
be a goal time-wise?
I don't know. If you can do 30-second intervals, and then you can build up to 2 or 3 minutes of sustained cold, and then you'll start cycling the temperature colder and colder as much as you can. I mean, showers is kind of limited on how cold you can get it unless you're in the wintertime.
So like a 10-minute cold shower would be great.
Yeah, you can probably last a lot longer in a shower than you can. I can't do 10 minutes in the cold immersion.
Well, that's because, there's Joe Rogan, right?
Yeah.
He says he does it basically every day.
Yep.
Which I think you guys pretty much.
I don't do it every day.
But I mean,
we do it regularly.
Often. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he said that he does it every day, but then he's like, well, not literally every day, but
it's part of his routine.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's very normal. Mm-hmm. But I think he's doing like 20 minutes.
He said that once, and he said he messed up.
That one time that he like filmed himself. Yeah.
You can get hypothermic too.
Yeah.
Really, the rule of thumb is, and this is getting to my next point. So to get that adaptation really is you want to get, however it takes, the duration or the temperature to get to where you're shivering. Mm-hmm. Once you start shivering, stop it. Okay. And then the most important thing is to let your body warm up by itself. Okay. Don't assist it with the warm up.
Right.
At that point, if you start shivering, you get out of the shower, dry off, and just let your body warm itself up.
Okay.
And that's where you get the benefits and the adaptation of the browning of the white fat and the whole 9 yards, right? So whatever that takes, whatever temperature, whatever duration that is to start the shiver response.
Okay.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be even more complicated than that. As far as doing that. And then, if the shower's not doing it and you like it enough, maybe you'll say, hey, maybe I want to invest in one of these things where I can set, right? Like a plunge or one of the other commercially available things, which I love that. I'm going to, not advertising it, but I'll just tell you, that plunge is fantastic.
Yeah.
Works great. So there's any other questions about how long or how cold? Really, it's basically start slow, try to induce the shiver response. Once you start shivering, get out.
Okay.
Yep. I mean, and it's going to be different from everyone.
Yeah.
Depending on how adapted you are. Now, what about what time of the day?
I didn't even think that was a thing.
Yep. That goes back to one of our episodes on sleep. Remember circadian rhythm?
I do.
We talked about the temperature variation throughout the day. Do you remember we were talking about how temperature drops at night?
Right.
Mm-hmm. You get your lowest temperature about 2 hours before you wake up. That's your lowest body temperature, your natural circadian rhythm. And then
the
it starts.
Cortisol helps.
That's
peak it.
Look at the big brain.
Look at my big brain.
Your endocrinology is legit, son.
Thank you.
So yeah, you're right though. The cortisol helps that process where you start raising your body temperature during the day. It starts peaking probably in late afternoon, then it starts falling off again. And that's what helps you go to sleep. And that's why we use things like those, like I take a hot bath at night to kind of start that cooling process to almost jump start it. And then use those things like the Uller, that little mattress cover that, that keeps our temperature low. But doing this cold plunge first thing in the morning is the same idea as doing the hot bath at night. So you're getting this big cold exposure in the morning almost to jumpstart that natural heating process. Gotcha. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if you did, theoretically, if you got all that norepinephrine, that adrenaline response, trying to do that before bed, probably would mess your sleep up a little bit.
Gotcha.
Okay. So you're going against your circadian rhythm. So if at all possible, try to do this thing in the morning.
Okay.
Would be good. And the last point I have, and we can go on with your questions, is when do we do this after exercise? Because we hear about this all the time. Right. Should I do?
When we see it with athletes, they'll
get in the
ice bath while they're on the field or whatever.
It feels good, but it can blunt some of the adaptations to the work you just put in. Because remember, we're putting up, especially for strength training, these type of things, it can blunt some, because we need that right after the workout. We need that inflammatory response. We need that adaptation to what we just did to happen.
So why has this been so normal?
Why did we do a bunch of shit for years? You know what I mean? It's because it feels good and it became almost bro science. It's like, we've done this for years. This is what my coach did.
It's difficult. Jump in the ice.
Get in the ice, son. And it feels good, right? But what we found is it's actually blunting the adaptive response, especially to strength training and stuff like that.
I think that's
So what I always do to be safe, and there's some literature that shows that with endurance athletes, it doesn't matter quite as much. Okay. But for something that's very muscular endurance, jiu-jitsu type of thing, especially, I honestly would wait, or lifting big time, especially if you're trying to make strength gains, I would wait till the next morning. Yeah, I wouldn't jump in right afterwards.
Okay.
We want to have that that adaptive response to the exercise instead of like, oh, it's almost like if you're trying to start a fire and then all of a sudden someone comes in and just throws water on it. It's like, dude, I'm trying to make something to cook.
Right.
Yeah, it's the same idea.
Okay.
We want that thing to happen to do what we need to do with it. So that's kind of my real quick rundown of this kind of cold exposure thing. So what clarification, questions, whatever, what do you guys have?
Actually, I'm glad you touched on that because I was going to ask about it inhibiting muscle growth because I had heard that you shouldn't. It can, if you're trying to do like a strength plan or whatever.
Yep, that's very well established.
Okay.
The literature is very clear on that now.
And then my other questions were, how long would you say, obviously it's probably going to depend person to person, but would you say adaptation takes before that conversion from white to beige fat? And then how long do those effects last? Meaning if somebody did it and then let's say they stopped for 2 or 3 months, how long would,
Yeah, again, think about what the body's, that's a great question, but think about what the body's doing. It's adapting to some kind of imposed environmental stimuli. I could ask you the same thing. What if I worked out for a week and then stopped for 2 months? What would happen?
Well, you'd lose some.
Yeah, it wouldn't. There was no imposed need for an adaptation to take place. So you will lose some of those adaptations for sure.
So would the beige fat go back to white?
It can, yeah.
Oh, so it can convert back.
Absolutely, because the body is very efficient in what it needs. It does things for what it needs, and it really tries not to have extra stuff that it doesn't need hanging around. It's why we want to clean up, kind of damaged organelles and damaged cells and stuff like that. The body really tries to do that. So, but if you start getting a shiver response, you're going to start that process very quickly. It's going to, and if you do that, for a couple weeks, the body's like, oh, this is something we're doing. Okay, we got to adapt to our environment because that's all we're doing. If we stop having that stimulus, of course, it's going to be like, well, we don't need to keep adapting to that anymore.
If it's during the summertime that you're doing this, right, and the beige fat is supposed to be there to help keep your body warm, but it's summertime, so you're not necessarily like shivering or eating. Like, is it still going to use that to keep you warm? Yeah.
So remember what we're doing. We're providing almost an artificial environmental stimulus. Typically before we had climate controlled housing, whatever, right?
How was that?
Yeah, I know. We just had a wood burning stove. Yeah.
Getting your beans cooking was probably difficult.
Yeah. Before the light bulb, it was a little rough. But
I'm happy you made it.
I know, barely. So you're giving it a stimulus and it's still, as long as it's regular, right? Perhaps you might have to do it more often in the summer if you're not normally as, because even if you were in air temperature, let's say you just lived at like 58, 60 degrees, you will still get a little bit of this happening, but it's not as intense, right?
Or would constantly re-exposing yourself when you're in the shower once it's converted, you're going to burn up some of it.
It activates it further.
So, then because I know I've asked you this too, like this would help because like me and Bill work outside all year round. So during the wintertime, it's more likely to help keep me warm, or I'm going to feel warmer in a colder
Absolutely.
Without shivering.
Yep. That's that adaptation process. It's the same when we're going to talk about another episode, the heat thing. One of the things I'm going to talk about is that adaptation to heat, where you're going to be more and more able to tolerate hotter and hotter environments, especially during training. Okay. But yeah, absolutely. And in Scandinavia, they actually have some old saying about, before wintertime, you want to start adapting,
Oh, yeah.
and so that there's a very deliberate, in that culture, a very deliberate thing they do so that they are warmer. And they have practices, and they do all kinds of, ocean swimming. They do contrast heat. And
I follow Tommy Langacker.
oh, very cool. Yeah.
I think I don't know if he's Norwegian or which Scandinavian country he's from, but he's always posting them, seems like year round, constantly just jumping in the water.
Yep.
It's crazy.
It's really good. Yeah. And they have a big thing with sauna over there too. Right. So it's really healthy.
Yeah.
But yeah, so just think of it like any other imposed demand on your body. If you're stopped doing it, yes, there will be some time where it carries over. Just like if I was lifting weights for a while, I'm not going to immediately lose that, but I am going to lose it.
Is that the same with circulation? Would you stop? Would your circulation,
of course,
your tips and stuff? It would.
Yeah, none of this is permanent, right? It's just where the brain is trying to go, okay, what is going on in our environment? What do I need to change to survive better? Yeah, if we stop getting that input, those adaptations are going to slowly start to diminish.
Okay.
Yep. Just like if you move from Antarctica to, sub-Saharan Africa, you're going to go from being cold adapted, very much like when Carrie and I moved up here to Washington in 2012. We were in Central Valley of California, and we moved in June. It was 109 when we left. And it was one of those Junes up here where it was 55 and raining. And you can imagine that 50-degree temperature change. We were freezing up here.
This year.
Well, it's the same.
Yeah.
We had a very similar year 10 years later.
Yeah.
But now we've adapted to the point where now we're like, oh, it's 90. I'm super hot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where before that was whatever, So yeah, that adaptation process is very interesting.
Well, Chris.
Yeah.
So it's not just about generating heat. It's also about increasing metabolism.
Yeah.
So even though you may not feel like you're getting as hot during the summertime, the other point is to increase metabolism.
Yeah. Carrie's saying it's not just generating heat, it's also those metabolic effects that it has, and a low level of increase of metabolism, that insulin sensitivity increase, all those metabolic effects that are very, very important, and those will continue to happen too, but then will kind of diminish over time.
How is it increasing glucose uptake?
So it has to do. Are you sure you want to go down there?
Well, I'm just curious.
It upregulates something like the something called the GLUT, a glucose transporter 4. Very similar to what exercise does in the skeletal muscle, where you can get non-insulin dependent glucose transport. In other words, the receptors that pull in glucose from the various tissues will be upregulated by cold.
So it's putting more glucose into the muscles?
Yep, and fat. So think about this.
Instead of it being stored as fat, it's taking that glucose, more of it, and putting it into the muscle.
And fat, though, because remember, fat utilizes glucose too. And if you have beige fat, where it's using glucose and fat to generate heat, that's going to be more metabolically active, and it can pull in glucose to use as fuel to generate heat.
So is it the reason why it increases your metabolism slightly because you're more likely to use it?
It is being utilized
energy versus the excess.
Correct.
Fat.
And I didn't mention it, but it also has effects on thyroid hormone as well too. There's an exhaustive, Rhonda Patrick did a great exhaustive thing on her website where she goes to all the papers and all the various effects. I tried to hone it down to stuff that I thought would be more interest to our community. But yeah, there's all kinds of stuff, and we still don't know a lot about it because it's just being studied a lot more now.
Okay.
Interesting.
Very cool.
Maybe we can, if you can, link a couple of those, send us.
I know you tell us to me every time.
This one might be good because you referenced Huberman's, and if there was...
I definitely want to link Rhonda Patrick's because you know what? In the podcast community, people that I think are putting out good stuff, it's not a competition, man. Many people just need good information. Those two do a great job with it.
We all listen to multiple podcasts.
I know, and I would definitely like to, get people to listen to good stuff. So we'll definitely link those two episodes, both Rhonda Patrick's link and Andrew Huberman's.
Yeah, people want to know more. And we'll even throw in Wim Hof's thing just, for getting started.
Oh, totally. There's a little and Huberman has a good protocol too.
Yeah.
So, I think it's a good deal. And you know what? Just do it. Kind of get over yourself and just say, hey, okay, I'm just going to be a little uncomfortable, and it gets better.
I got one more question.
Okay.
Because Wim Hof is really big on the effects on, like, I feel like on his immune system.
Mm-hmm.
So how does this strengthen the immune system?
Okay.
Does it?
Wim Hof, the thing he did with his immune system is more to do with his breathing techniques.
Oh,
Okay. That's what was studied with him. And it's remarkable what he's able to do. He's able to basically have control over a part of the nervous system that we didn't really think we actually had control, the autonomic nervous system. So that's different. With cold exposure, there's some early evidence when I was doing my research for this that it may have a slight benefit in immune function as far as a certain increase in a certain amounts of certain types of white blood cells. There may be some decreased respiratory infections, but it wasn't very robust. It wasn't like a huge effect. The Wim Hof stuff is specifically due to his ability to kind of control his autonomic nervous system.
He was just using those breathing techniques with his cold.
Yeah, but the immune part wasn't really necessarily directly related to his cold, but it was the techniques he was using.
Okay.
Because he was in a hospital bed when they were doing that too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, they injected him with a lipopolysaccharide, a really inflammatory component of E. coli, and just basically spiked an infection. Basically gave him an infection that he was able to kind of mitigate the fever and all kinds of crazy. It's crazy, yeah. So I mean, there's a lot of untapped stuff that, and that's that's a great documentary to look at. His stuff is super cool.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, we don't have any. I didn't compile any of the questions from listeners, so they're going to have to wait till next time.
So it's really on you. You're about to put it onto them.
A little bit.
Okay.
Next episode, we will be doing the opposite.
I don't know if we're going to do that next or not.
Okay.
We're going to think about it, but it's going to be coming up soon.
Okay.
We're going to look at the heat piece too. And there's some things I think to our community that I think would be kind of cool to mess around with and see what we think.
So if anyone has questions, you got a week or two to if it pertains to, heat therapy and saunas and all that kind of stuff. Heat shock proteins.
Yeah, exactly.
I got a random question that has nothing to do with anything that you guys are talking about. Can I ask?
Mint chocolate chip.
No, that's not it.
Okay.
Okay, sorry, Chris. Just throwing this out there.
Uh-oh.
It's not even that great of a question. Has nothing to do with this topic.
Okay.
So, you know how there's like body recompositioning? And you know how like you will maintain the same weight while you're building muscle but losing fat? Like that can happen.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a point where as you continue to build muscle, your body weight will start to drop though? Like where you won't be maintaining that anymore? Does that make sense? Like you're almost burning more fat than maybe putting on muscle?
You could.
It always seems like there's these people who like when they do body recomp, they go from like a higher weight down to a lower weight, but they look muscular still.
Some of that is due to, if you look at the guys in that movie 300, the trainer for them, Mark Twight, he didn't so much they did gain some muscle, but it wasn't so much that they got huge as they got super lean. And so they looked more muscular. And that was the big thing. You can look super jacked and not have like a whole bunch of muscle, but you can be really lean looking and still have a good amount of muscle. So a lot of that look, they probably are, if they continue in caloric restriction and all that, they probably are losing a little muscle mass, but they're so lean they look still muscular.
Okay.
I saw something on, I don't know, this was a long time ago. It was on bodybuilding.com, and there was, he was a bodybuilder, and he was showing the examples. He documented his cut to competition body fat percent, 4%. But he was showing he did an example with his shirt on and then shirt off down the line. And he was showing how there's times where, like, when he started getting into that single digits, like 8%, he, with his shirt on, he didn't even look that, like, buff.
Right.
Shirt's off, he looks like an Adonis.
Right.
Right. But when he was at like 13,
Yep.
with his shirt on, he actually had some like structure to the shirt and stuff like that. He filled it out, but then with his shirt off, he also looked real muscular. It was very interesting, like watching just how that would work.
It's a loss of muscle glycogen too.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And that, to your point, that's exactly what she was describing. But you can see them. They still look jacked looking, but not necessarily. They're not any bigger.
Yeah.
So there's, you can't really have your cake and eat it too. You can't.
If anything, he was technically smaller.
Yep.
Right. But looked, especially when he was getting to that, if I remember right, to that like 10%, he had lost like half an inch on his biceps.
Yep.
But from when he was like 18%, because bodybuilders, they'll pack on a lot of weight and then they'll cut it. But he looked way more jacked.
Yep.
But is that half inch from the subcutaneous fat that was on his arm, or was it muscle? Or a combination of both?
And remember, they're really loading up their muscle glycogen. Their hypertrophy is, sarcoplasmic. In other words, the cells are bigger. They're stuffed with, and as you lose, because you're cutting water too, you're going to get that more emaciated look and look more cut, right? So that aesthetic doesn't necessarily mean, because like Bill said, if you measured muscle mass per muscle mass, you probably lost some muscle mass, but looks more jacked.
Yeah.
Yep. That's actually a good question.
Cray.
So it's a little trick of the eye.
Yes.
Trick of the
It's
eye.
an illusion.
Well, that's it then
Yeah.
for this episode.
I don't think you could last much longer.
I'm catching my
Are you awake,
second
though?
win. I got my second win.
He's fine. I'm just messing with him.
How dare you? You're the one that's old. You need a nap.
Okay.
I do, actually. Wow. He was just like, I'm going to cut you.
I went on the defense.
I like that.
Real quick.
Email questions, grapplingwithpodcast@gmail. Comment on the YouTube. Give us a review on whatever platform you're
And we're
listening.
slowly creeping up subscribers. So
We're trying.
yeah, it's
trying.
getting there.
When I start putting money towards those bots, that's really going to help.
I love it. Fake subscribers. I love it.
Yeah, anything you want us to talk about too, just throw it at us and we'll do it. We'll talk about it, or maybe even make a full episode.
Cool.
Other than that, stay beautiful.
Later.